Hello and welcome back. We are discussing Chapter 6, Percents, focusing on Lesson 6, Simple Interest, and this is the guided practice. So I'm going to do a problem to get us started, and then you're going to do some problems on your own. So what we need to do is write the formula to compute the missing value and solve. So what we have is we have the principal, the rate, the time, and the interest. So we know that we're going to be using the formula, the simple interest formula. I equals P times R times T. Our principal is $1,000. The thing that we don't know is the interest. So that's what we need to determine. But we can substitute all the other values in. I is going to equal the principal, which is $100, multiplied by the annual, the rate, but we need to make this into a decimal. So to do that, we're going to move that over 2 places, which means it's 0.04, 0.04. And then multiply the time is 2 years, so times 2. So to find the interest, we're just going to multiply all those things together. We're going to go 100 times 0.04 times 2, enter. And we end up with $8. So the interest earned is $8. All right, let's go ahead and look at problem number 2. We're using the same formula again. Interest equals the principal times R times T. So you need to make sure you write that down. This is the first thing you write down. Except this time we're finding the rate. So we need to find the rate here, the R. And remember, whatever we find, it's going to be in the form of a decimal, so we're going to have to convert it back to a percentage. So we know the interest this time. The interest is $9. P, the principal is 150, times R is what we're trying to figure out, times T, 2 years. Okay, we're trying to isolate R and get it by itself. To do that, we have to simplify the side of the equation. We're going to do that by multiplying these two together. So 150 times 2 ends up being 2 times 0, 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So this ends up being 300R. We need to get R by itself, so we have to get rid of this 300. The 300 is related to R through multiplication, so we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. We're going to divide both sides by 300. That means that R is going to be 9 divided by 300. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the side here. 9 divided by 300. We're just going to use our calculator for this one. 9 divided by 300. 9 divided by 300 equals 0.03. Now we need to convert this decimal into a percentage, and we do that by moving the decimal place to the right 2 times. So that means that our rate equals 3%. Okay? Now I want you to go ahead and try 3 and 4. So make sure you go ahead and write that formula first and then find the missing values. Go ahead and get started on 3 and 4 only. Oh, I'm sorry. There's our friend reminding us to pause the device. When you get done, press play and we'll go over the answers. All right, see you in a bit. All right, we're back with problem 3. Let's go ahead and see how you did. We know that we're using the formula interest equals principal times rate times time. For this particular problem, we do not know what the time is. So we need to figure out what the time is, how many years was it invested. We know that the interest accumulated is $10. The principal is $200. And the rate is 5%, but we need to go ahead and convert that to a decimal. So move it 2 places to the left. So that ends up being 0.05. 0.05, yeah. So that we're going to multiply that by 0.05 times t. Okay, so we're trying to figure out what t is. To do that, we have to simplify this side of the equation. So we're going to go 200 times 0.05. I'm going to go ahead and do that on the side. 200 times 0.05. 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 2 is 10. There are 2 decimal places, which means there's 2 in my answer, which means it ends up being 10. Okay, so we have 10 equals, this ends up being 10 t. We have to get t by itself. There is a 10 on this side of the equation. 10 is related to t through multiplication, so we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We need to divide both sides by 10, and 10 divided by 10 is 1. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 1 times t is t. So that means that the time that the money was invested was 1 year. So if you got that one right, great job. Let's move on to problem 4. We now are going to write down the formula. The interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. For this one, we do not know what the principal is, but we know everything else. So let's go ahead and substitute that stuff in. The interest is 30. The interest earned is 30. The principal here is what we don't know. The rate is 3%, but we need to move that and change that into a decimal, which means we're going to move it 2 places to the left. That ends up being 0.03. That is the rate multiplied by 0.03. The time is 4 years. So yeah, so to figure out what P is, we need to simplify this. To simplify this, I'm just going to do this off to the side. 0.03 times 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Write the 2, carry the 1. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is just 1. And yeah, that's it. So this has this problem has 2 decimal places. So that means our answer needs to have 2 decimal places as well. So this ends up being 30 equals 0.12p. Now I want to get p by itself, so I need to get rid of this 0.12. So I'm just going to go ahead and divide, because this is multiplied 0.12 times p, so I have to do the inverse operation, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 0.12. All right. So on the side, I'm going to go 30 divided by 0.12. Now, when you're doing this, you can never divide by a decimal, so we have to change it. Move that decimal place over, and if we move it over twice here, we have to move it twice here. So this ends up being 3,000 divided by 12. Now, can 12 go into 3? No. Can 12 go into 30? Yes, it can go in 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. We subtract, and I need to borrow. 10 take away 4 is 6, and that's a 2. Then we drop down this 0 here. And we get, how many times does 12 go into 60? It goes in 5 times. 5 times 2 is 0. Carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. So we have no remainder. And then we drop down that 0, and 12 can't go into there. So our answer ends up being 250. So 250 is our original principal. So if you got that one right, great job. So now I want you to go ahead and try to work out problems 5 and 6 on your own. And here's our friend the Pause Dragon reminding you to pause and go ahead and work these out. And when you get done, press play. Make sure that you're writing all the formulas and defining all your terms and showing all your work. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. All right, we are back with problem number 5. Jules borrowed $500 for 3 years at simple interest rate of 6%. How much interest will be due at the end of 3 years? How much will Jules have to repay? So there's two things this problem's asking. How much interest will be due? And then how much will Jules have to repay? So since we're dealing with simple interest, we know that we can use the simple interest formula. So that is going to be I equals P times R times T. So what are the things that we know? Well, we know she borrowed $500, and that is our principal. Okay. So I'm going to define my variables. P equals $500. She did it for 3 years. So that is our time. So T equals 3. At a simple interest rate of 6%. So our rate is 6%, but we need to go ahead and change that into a decimal. So we're going to move it 2 places to the left. And that ends up being 0.06. So our rate ends up being 0.06. Now we can go ahead and we need to figure out the interest. So that is the thing that we do not know. So we need to figure that out. So we're just going to substitute these values in for the variables. We end up with the interest equals the principal is $500 times the interest rate is 0.06 times the time, which is 3. So we're just going to put all of these values into our calculator. $500 times 0.06 times 3, and we end up with 90. So the interest earned is $90. So how much interest will be due at the end of 3 years? We will say the interest due will be $90. So that answers that first question. Now the next question says, how much will Jules have to repay? Now that is referring to the total amount. And remember, we have a different equation for that. That equation is the amount equals the principal plus the interest. Okay? So how much will Jules have to repay? That's the total amount. All right. We know the principal. The principal is $500, and we just determined the amount of interest, which is $90. So we're just going to go ahead and substitute those values in for those variables. So 500 plus 90 means that the total amount is $590. So we can say the total amount Jules will have to repay is $590. So if you got that right, you got both parts, the interest, the amount of interest, and also the total amount. Great job. Okay, let's go ahead and get started on problem 6. So problem 6 states that Karen maintained a balance of $250 in her savings account for 8 years. The financial institution paid simple interest of 4%. What was the amount of interest earned? All right, so we know that we're dealing with simple interest, so we're going to use our simple interest formula, which is interest equals the principal multiplied by the rate multiplied by the time. We need to go ahead and define our variables. So it says Karen maintained a balance of $250. Okay, so that is our principal, $250. So P equals $250. she maintained that in her account for 8 years. So 8 years is our time. So T equals 8. This is our principal of 250. What else do we know? We know the financial institution paid simple interest of 4%. Okay, that is our rate, 4%. But we know that we have to turn that into a decimal. So 4%, to turn that into a decimal, we move the decimal place 2 places to the left, and that ends up being 0.04. So our rate ends up being 0.04. What the question is asking us is, what was the amount of interest earned, which is our I. That's what we need to determine. So to determine that, we're just going to go ahead and substitute all these values in for the variables and figure out what I is. So the principal is 250. The rate is 0.04, and the time is 8. So we're just going to go ahead and plug all these values into our calculator. We get 250 times 0.04 times 8, and we end up with $80. So that means that the interest earned was $80. So if you got that right, wonderful, magnificent job. And let's go ahead and turn the page and look at the next set of problems. So the next set of problems are dealing with simple interest, and there is a table here, and we're going to have to complete the table. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the first one. Problem number 7. So we're dealing with principal, rate, time, and interest earned. So we're going to be using the same. I'm going to just go ahead and label this as problem 7. So I'm going to write our formula. The interest earned equals the principal multiplied by the rate multiplied by time. So for problem 7, we know that the principal is $300. We're trying to find the interest earned, okay? So the interest earned is what we're trying to determine. We have all of the other values. So I'm just going to substitute those in. So the interest earned equals the principal, which is $300, multiplied by the rate, which needs to be turned into a decimal. I move it over 2 places. So that equals 0.03. 0.03 multiplied by the time, which is 4 years. Okay? Then I'm just going to go ahead and plug in these values into my calculator. 300 times 0.03 times 4 equals 36. So that means that the interest earned equals $36. All right, so we're going to put that here, $36. Okay, let's go ahead and do problem 8 together. So for problem 8, we're going to be using the same formula. The interest earned equals the principal multiplied by the rate multiplied by time. Except now we are trying to determine what the rate is. Okay, we have all the other values, so we're just going to substitute those in. The interest earned for problem 8 is $67.50. So $67.50 equals the principal for problem 8 is $450 times R times the amount of time, which is 3. Okay? And we're trying to figure out what R is. Now, to figure out what R is, we need to simplify this side of the equation. So I need to figure out what 450 times 3 is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that over here on the side. 450 times 3. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 5 is 15. Write the 5, carry the 1. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So that ends up being 1,350 R. I'm still trying to get R by itself. Right now it is not by itself. It is being multiplied by 1,350, so I need to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. I'm going to divide both sides by 1,350. 1,350 divided by 1,350 ends up being 1. 1 times R is just R, so now we have R by itself. And now I just need to determine, well, what is 67.5 divided by 1,350? And that ends up being 0.05. Now remember, the rate is in the form of a decimal, so we need to go ahead and change that back into a percentage. And we do that by moving it 2 places to the right. And what that tells us is that the rate equals 5%. And then we can just go ahead and fill in our table here. So the rate equals 5%, okay? Now we're on to problems 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So I just want you to go and continue working out these problems. Use this as your guide. Write the formula out, substitute the terms in, show all your work, and then when you have your answer, identify your answer, and then fill in the table, okay? So I want you to work on 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. When you get done with those, oh, wait, there's our friend the pauser. I can remind you to pause your device, and when you get back, get done with all those problems, press play, and we'll work the problems out and see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, we are back talking about problem 9. So problem 9, what are we looking for? We're looking for the time. We know that we're dealing with the interest equals principal times rate times time. So I want you to write that every single time, every single time, every single time, every single time. This time we are trying to figure out what the time is. We don't have that. So that's the variable we need to isolate. Do we know what the interest earned is? For number 9, yes, the interest earned was $112.50. That equals the principal, which is $500, multiplied by the rate, which is 4.5, and we need to go ahead and turn that into a decimal, so we move it 2 places to the left, which means this ends up being 0.045. So 0.045 multiplied by time, which is what we're trying to determine. So to figure that out, we need to go ahead and multiply these two together. So I'm going to go ahead and take this up here. 500 multiplied by 0.045. 5 times 0, 0, 5 times 0, 0, 5 times 5 is 25. I'm going to the tens place, so I'm going to add a 0 there. 4 times 0 is 0, 4 times 0 is 0, 4 times 5 is 20. Then I add 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0, 5 plus 0 is 5, 2 plus 0 is 2, and 2. And then how many decimal places do I have? I have 1, 2, 3. That means my answer needs to have 1, 2, 3, which means the decimal goes right here. So all of this ends up being, I'm rewriting this, 22.5 t. So I need to isolate t and get it by itself, but right now it's being multiplied by 22.5. So I need to do the inverse operation, which would be dividing both sides by 22.5 to find the time. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that really quickly here. 112.5 divided by 22.5 ends up being 5. Perfect. So that means that the time is 5. So t equals 5. That is the answer. So let's go ahead and fill that in our table. 5 years. All right. So if you got that one right, great job. Let's go ahead and move on to problem 10. Oh, I guess I need to see everything. Okay, so I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit. Okay, problem 10 is here. Go ahead and make a line across here. Okay, problem 10, we're using the same formula. The interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. Here we are trying to determine what the principal is. Okay, so we know that the interest earned is 108 equals the principal times the annual percentage rate. We need to change this into a decimal, so we move it over 2 places to the left. So it ends up being 0.08. 0.08. Multiply it by the time, which would be 2. Okay, and we're trying to isolate P, but to do that, we have to simplify this side of the equation, which means we need to multiply those two things together. So I'm going to do that over here on the side. 0.08 times 2. 2 times 8 is 16. Write the 6, carry the 1. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is, yeah. And then we need to find the decimal places. There's 2 here, which means there needs to be 2 there. So the decimal goes right here in front. So we have 108 equaling 0.16 P. We're still trying to get P by itself. To do that, we need to get rid of the 0.16. It's being multiplied, so we have to do the inverse operation, which would be division. We're going to divide both sides by 0.16. 0.16 divided by 0.16 is 1. 1 times P is just P. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and determine what clear 108 divided by 0.16 is. And that ends up being 108 divided by 0.16, 675. So that means our principal is $675. So we're going to go ahead and put that up here. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and move on to problem 11. So problem 11, we're doing the same thing. We're going to use the same formula. The interest equals the principal multiplied by the rate times the time, except this time we're trying to determine the amount of interest earned. The amount of interest earned. Okay, so we're going to substitute the values that we know. The principal is 700. The rate is 4%, but we need to go ahead and convert that to a decimal, so we're going to move it over 2 places to the left. That means we end up with 0.04. And our time is equal to 3 years. So now we're just going to go ahead and figure out what all those values are so we can find our interest earned. So 700 times 0.04 times 3 equals 84. So that means that the interest earned would be $84. And we're just going to go ahead and plug that in. I'm going to highlight this one. I like highlighting the answers. Okay, so the interest earned would be $84. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to problem 12. So problem 12 here, we're using the same formula. Interest earned equals the principal times the rate times time. Now we need to figure out the rate. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in all the other information. The interest would be $750, equaling the principal. Oh, wait. The interest earned is $90. I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and start over. My bad. The interest earned is $90. I equals 90. The principal is $750. The rate is what we're trying to figure out. And the time, oh shoot, I'm having technical difficulties. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. We will try this problem again. Okay, let's try this. Take 3. Okay. The interest earned would be $90, equaling the principal is $750, multiplied by the rate, which is what we're trying to figure out, and then the time is 2 years. Okay, finally, we got that one right. Perfect. Whew, that was rough. Okay, so to figure out what R is, we need to go ahead and simplify this side. So we need to figure out what 750 times 2 is. So I'm just going to do that on the side. 750 times 2. 750 times 2. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is 15. Wow. So we have 90 equals, that's equal to 1,500 R. We're trying to figure out what R is. Right now, R is not by itself, so it's being multiplied by 1,500. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We're going to divide both sides by 1,500. So we're just going to figure out what that is. 90 divided by 1,500 ends up being 0.06 equals R. Now this is the rate in the form of a decimal, and we need to go ahead and convert that back to a percentage. We do that by moving the decimal place over 2 places to the right. So we end up with the rate being 6%. Okay, so our rate equals 6%. Okay, perfect. So we have one last problem here. Where should we do it? I think we should do it right here. So let's do it. Problem 13. So problem 13, we're doing the same formula. Interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. Let's go ahead and, what are we trying to figure out? The time. So we're trying to determine the time. That is our T. Okay. The interest earned is $100. That is equal to the principal, which is $800, multiplied by the rate, which is 2.5%, but we need to turn that into a decimal, so we need to move it 2 places to the left, which would make it 0.025. 0.025 multiplied by T, which is what we're trying to determine. Now we want to get T by itself, but first we need to simplify this right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and figure out what is 800 times 0.025. That ends up being 20. Well, that's kind of nice. So we have 100 equaling 20 T. We're trying to get T by itself. Right now it's being multiplied by 20, so we need to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We need to divide 20 to both sides. 20 divided by 20 is 1. 1 times T is just T. 100 divided by 20 is just, well, it's 5. 20 goes into 100 5 times. So that means the T is 5 years. So the time would be 5 years. So if you got all of those right, yoke denki mashita, you did a great job, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.